Thank you for joining us for this week's message at Crosswind Church. If you have any questions about this message or about Crosswind Church, please visit us at www.crosswindchurch.net, or you can email us at info@crosswindchurch.net.
With us. Now, you guys may be totally freaked out because we are talking about spiders, but you understand that people are afraid of a lot of different things, correct? Like, we all kind of have our own kind of fears. If you were to Google a list of things that most people are afraid of, the top 10 list may vary a little bit, but somewhere in the top 5, certainly in the top 3, you're going to have these. In fact, 1 and 2 hardly ever change. Number 1 and number 2 are the fear of public speaking and the fear of dying. Which I always thought that was kind of interesting because as a Christian we're told not to fear death, and I speak publicly every week, so it's a little weird for me to something that I do on a regular basis for that to be people's worst fear ever. Number 3 on most of the list that I saw was arachnophobia, the fear of spiders. About 30% of Americans deal with arachnophobia on some level. That means if you were to pause right now, look to your left, and look to your right, one of those people, at least, sitting on your left or right, or you, one of those people is likely afraid of spiders. Now, for most people, let me tell you what that looks like. They're not super deathly afraid. They can kind of deal with it. They can kind of get through life on a regular basis. But about 6% or so of the population, depending on what number you believe, about that 6% or so, they have such a fear of spiders that they can't even, it interferes with their daily life. They can't walk into rooms without checking to see if there's spiders who are there. In fact, if you're a part of that 6%, you're probably not here at church today because we battle spiders here at Crosswind Church. It's one of those things, we live in the middle of a field and we've got, a big metal building, and it's one of those things that we have some people spray for, but it's one of those things that's kind of a struggle from time to time. Now, I'm so thankful. I don't suffer from a fear of death, really. I don't suffer from a fear of public speaking, certainly, and I also don't suffer from a fear of spiders, and that was actually a good thing for me when I was in college, because when I was a freshman in college, I made a decision that I wanted to go to Vanderbilt when it came time for medical school. And so I went to my advisor, and I sat down with him and I said, what does I need to do to get into Vandy? I want to go to Vandy for med school, and I know I'm just a freshman in college, but I want to go ahead and start thinking along those lines. He said, well, Vanderbilt is a research institution, so you need to do some research. It really doesn't matter what on. You just need to be doing some research so that you have some stuff you can present to the people when you go for interviews at Vanderbilt. And I went, okay, great. He said, you should go to your biology chairman, the chairman of the biology department, because I was a biology major, and ask them if they're doing any research projects that you can kind of tag along with. And I thought, well, that's awesome. So me, little 18-year-old Jeremy, walks over to the biology department, sits down in Dr. Ron Jenkins, the chairman of our department, in his office, and I say, Dr. Jenkins, what is it that you guys are doing research on? Is there anything I can do? He's like, well, actually, we do have a project going on right now, and we have a question that we would like you to answer. I said, well, what is that? He said, well, we're writing a book, and that book is called Spiders of the Eastern United States. And me and another professor around here who happened to be a genetics professor, we are actually going out into the woods and out into the fields, and we're collecting spiders, photographing them, researching them, and putting all this information into a book. And I was like, okay, that's weird. But what is it you want me to do? He said, well, actually, it's kind of interesting. You may not want to do it when we tell you. Well, what is it you want me to do? He said, we want you to research this question that we have pertaining to black widow spiders. One of the handful of venomous spiders that we have here in the United States, we want you to do some research with regard to that. And I said, well, what would it look like? And he was like, well, you're going to have to go catch black widow spiders. And there was something inside of me that's deeply broken and disturbed, because I went, that sounds awesome, right? How do I sign up? What do I do? And so for 4 years, about 3.5 years or so of college, I did independent research on black widow spiders, where I went out and I caught black widows, measured them, cataloged them, photographed them, and recorded all the data that I had for a senior research project. And just for this series, because I was so geeked up about getting to talk to you guys about spiders today, I actually went out and caught some. These are black widows here, like real live black widows. Now are you freaked out? Okay. Right? I promise not to drop them. This one right here is a baby. It's a baby, and it's a baby female, and she is not happy right now. she'll grow up into a big old mama. And then this right here, this one looks like a big one. Some of you on the front row can actually see it. She looks big. She's actually an adolescent. She's like a 20-year-old spider. She's a grown-up, she's an adult, but she's got a lot more growing to do. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of how she is. And what's interesting is that once you learn how to catch black widow spiders, you never forget how to catch black widow spiders. That was one of the things I really wanted to kind of see when I went to go catch them this week. So what I did is when you go to catch spiders, first you learn about their habitat. Like, you learn about where they live. Like, I've never found a black widow spider in the woods. So if you want to avoid these guys, go to the woods, because that's not where they live. They live out in places where they can get up out of the water. So they may live in a place that's moist, but they'll get up under something so that they don't get wet. And they like to hide from people. They don't like to be around people. So they'll get under a house, or they'll get in the water meter, where you're going to turn the water off to your house, or those sorts of things. That's kind of where they'll kind of end up. And you can always tell, though, like under rocks or under logs, you can always tell when you go out to look for a black widow spider, you can tell if there's going to be a black widow there because there's some signs. And the biggest sign that I always look for when I was hunting for black widows is the web. Right? You can always tell the web. Because even though you'll never see a black widow spider just like chilling out in the middle of the floor, you will see the web. They'll get up under a rock or under a log, and then they'll spin this web kind of out around the habitat where they're kind of living, because they want to catch lunch. They want to eat dinner, right? And that's how they do it, because that's where the bugs are. And so when you start looking, you see a rock or you see a log and you see that web, you can be certain that there's probably a spider underneath there. And sure enough, if you go digging enough, if you go looking enough, probably you'll end up finding the spider that's spun the web. So I caught around 150 or so, plus or minus 50 spiders when I was in my time at the university there at Sanford, and cataloged them all. And there were times when I would go out for a hunt, and I would find the web, and I would find like a sure tell sign there's a spider there. But when you start kind of looking under stuff, you just can't find her. She's nowhere to be found. But you can test. You know that you can test to see if there's actually a spider there. The way that you can do it is if you see a web and you're pretty certain there's a spider there but you can't find her, you just tear the web down. And in a couple of days you can come back and you know what she'll have done? She'll have re-spun the web. And you can go, you know what? I need to dig a little deeper. I need to look a little more, because even though I tore down the web, the spider is still there. Now let me tell you why this is incredibly important today, and I'm going to start by telling you about another book. About a year ago, a guy by the name of Carlos Whitaker wrote a book called Kill the Spider. Jody and I got to hear him speak at a Catalyst conference, a big leadership conference, and I bought his book. He's autographed this one for me. And if you want to read this book, you can go find it on all the places that you buy books. We have a couple copies of it out in the foyer if you want to purchase it there through the store or borrow mine, either way. But in this book, he kind of cataloged his journey of kind of self-discovery. And in that journey of self-discovery that Carlos kind of cataloged, he told us, or he used an analogy about spiders and about webs. And it's an analogy that's going to carry us throughout the rest of this series that we're calling The Hunt. In the book, what Carlos told us is that a web is any kind of behavior that we use to medicate a feeling that we have. Or it's a behavior that we engage in order to kind of numb a feeling that we have, or something bad that we feel or think about ourselves. And so you guys know we have all kinds of these different behaviors. There's literally millions of these kind of webs, is what he called them. So like if you're not feeling good about the way that your body looks, like you may engage in working out, or you may engage in eating better, right? Sometimes, in fact, on New Year's, we're so aware of certain things about ourselves, we make resolutions to make ourselves better, right? We kind of do that sometimes. There's other things, though. Like we may feel a certain way about ourselves, and so we'll check out from everywhere else. We'll kind of escape. We'll escape into television, or we'll escape into our phones, or we'll escape into social media. Or maybe it's a drug, or alcohol, or caffeine, or shopping, or eating that we use to kind of self-medicate that feeling that we have inside of ourselves. When we feel bad about ourselves, we go and we spend some money on Amazon. Or we feel bad about ourselves, we go and we buy a dozen donuts. Or we feel bad about ourselves and we go and engage in all of these types of behaviors. The thing about medicators in this way is there literally could be millions of them. Everybody can define what it is for themselves, but a medicator, or a web, as Carlos Whitaker said, is a behavior that you engage in to numb a feeling. It's a behavior that you engage in so that you can feel better about something that's going on inside of your life. Now, what's great about these behaviors is a lot of times they're visible. Like, it's easy for you to see it. In fact, if we were to pause right now and ask you to pull out a piece of paper and jot down what you think some of those behaviors are, you could probably come up with some. You probably know what they are already. And if you don't know what they are, oftentimes these webs that we spin are so visible that the people around us can tell what they are. So if you don't know what they are, just ask the person sitting next to you. Likely they already are aware of what one or two of them are anyway. But because they're visible, because people can see them, we often get really good at web management. We get really good at cleaning out the cobwebs of our life, don't we? So we make New Year's resolutions. We turn over a new leaf. In some case, if it's an addiction that we're dealing with, we'll go to rehab, right? We'll start dieting. We'll try to get rid of all of the junk food from our house. I'll tell you one of the things that I used to do, I still kind of do it. Like multiple times in my life, I have given up all sodas. Because that's something that I love. It's something that I, in fact, probably use in some way, in an unhealthy way. It's destructive to my body. And so I just kind of give them up. And what happens is I always kind of find my way back to Mountain Dew. Right? And that's the thing, watch. That's the thing with web management. It's when all we do is start cleaning out webs. All we do is start behavior modification. That is more often than not, we end up failing over again. There's a reason why so many folks that enter in rehab relapse. There's a reason why so many New Year's resolutions are over by February. There's a reason. Maybe sometimes we even overcome one of our medicators and we just replace it with another. So I don't veg out anymore to video games. I do it to Instagram. You see what I'm saying? I just replace one medicator with another. Because there's something else that's causing the behavior. And unless we dig down deep and look real hard, we can clean all of the webs out that we want. The spider will rebuild the web. And so Carlos Whitaker says what we've got to look to do is find the spider, corner the spider, and kill the spider. So that's what this series is about. It's about inviting you to go with me on a spider hunt. Only this time the spider hunt is going to happen in your own life. And this time, probably the spider hunt that you're engaging in, you're not going to be able to get help from the person sitting next to you, and you're likely not going to be able to help them find and kill their spider. It's going to be something that you're going to have to do yourself. Others can come alongside you and support you, but you're going to have to be honest. And so for the next few weeks, what I want you to do, as we start kind of diving into this world, we start hunting for spiders in our life, here's what I need you to do. When we ask you to go home and ask about questions to yourself, I need you to do it not flippantly, not passively. I need you to do it actively and intentionally. That means I need you to go home and I need you to ask the question, serious, show enough, maybe write down a couple answers, spend some time in prayer with God and say, God, help me to identify these things that are causing all of these kind of behaviors in my life. And you know what's interesting? When I started dating Jody, actually before we started dating Jody, this is how I knew she was into me. I would take her spider hunting with me. Yeah. Like, I told you I was bad at dating. It's a terrible idea. College students, don't do this. It's a terrible idea. But she would go with me, and we would go out. And no doubt, it made her incredibly uncomfortable. Like when you turn over a rock and there's a black widow there, like, it freaks you out just a little bit. Here's the thing. When you go spider hunting, and you start asking yourself questions, and you start turning over the rocks inside your life, it is going to be uncomfortable. But if we are able to put to death spiders in our life, then we may actually figure out what it is that Jesus meant when he says, I came so you have life and to have it to the full. I came so that you could know me and so that you could find freedom. Maybe, just maybe, if we deal with the uncomfortable for just a minute, we'll be able to find some freedom. So before we go on this hunt, there's a couple things that I need you to know. I need you to know exactly what a spider is. A spider is an agreement that we have made with a lie. A spider is an agreement that we have made a lie. You might say it this way. A spider is a lie that we believe. You with me? It's something maybe that someone has said to you, or that something has said to you, or that you've said to yourself, and you have believed that lie, and it has taken seed or root in your heart. Sometimes in psychology circles, we talk about these being core beliefs about ourselves, core beliefs about the world, core beliefs about God, and they lead to all sorts of different destructive behaviors. And as we go seeking out these lies, there's two things that we need to know, and this is what we're going to look in God's Word today and discover. There's two things we need to know. The first thing, we need to know where the lie comes from. Second of all, we need to know how we go to battle against those lies. So as we do that, I'm just going to tell you this is a deeply personal journey for me. And I hope that it is for you as well. And so before we open God's Word, will you pray with me as we kind of move forward? God, you have led us to this journey today to discover those lies that are inside of us. Help us to shine the light of truth on them, that we might be forever transformed, that we might help advance your kingdom, that we might be the men and women you have called us to be. We praise him in Jesus' name. Amen. Jesus, in the Gospel of John, John, who was the disciple that Jesus loved, he was one of those guys that hung out with Jesus. Jesus, in that Gospel, as the story of Jesus' life, he makes a statement that's going to kind of begin our journey today. And we're going to put it on the screen, but we're not going to hang out here for very long. John chapter 8, verse 44, I believe is what it says. It says this: He, talking about Satan, Jesus talking about Satan, he was a murderer from the beginning, and not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. And when he, Satan, lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar, the father of lies. So what Jesus is going to lay out to us in this one little verse is the truth that's going to help us kind of move forward. We need to recognize that the lies we buy into are maybe told to us by someone. Maybe someone exhibited some kind of behavior that's caused us to believe a certain lie. But the place that this lie comes from is from the mouth of our enemy, Satan himself. He is the father of lies. He gives birth to lies. And Jesus tells us that he has been lying from the beginning. You may remember in Genesis chapter 3, when Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, that perfect utopia with God, in community with God, in community with each other, being known and fully known both by each other and by God. Satan shows up on the scene, walks up to Eve, and tells her a lie. In fact, he tells her a really big lie. In short, you want to know what he says? He says, hey, God's holding out. God's holding out. God's got something that he doesn't want you to have. And he's told you you're going to die. If you eat this fruit, you're not going to die. Come on. He's lying. He's holding out. God that you worship, he's not really that good. And Satan has been lying ever since. As we thought about this over the last week, I've become more and more convinced that there's really two different categories that Satan is going to lie to us in. He's going to lie to us about God. He's going to tell us that God doesn't love us. He's going to tell us that God isn't good. He's going to tell us that God isn't powerful. He's going to tell us that God can't save us. He's going to tell us that God is selfish and out for his own whatever and doesn't care about us. He's going to tell us lies about who God is to cause us to doubt God's goodness, God's power, God's provision in all aspects of our life. I think the other area he's going to lie to us is he's going to tell us lies about ourselves. And the thing that makes the lie about ourselves so dangerous, we'll talk about it in a couple of weeks, is that there's truth in the lie that he tells us about ourselves. It's a partial lie. It's a partial truth, right? Which is the same thing as a lie. He's going to tell us that we're not worth it. He's going to tell us that we aren't valuable. He's going to tell us that we're not good enough. He's going to tell us we're not enough. In fact, there are some of you here who just by me saying those words, that strikes a chord in your heart because that's a lie that you have ended up believing. And Satan is the father of lies. He's going to come at us with these lies. And let me tell you why it's really important that we realize that the lie comes not necessarily from our friends, not necessarily from our family. It comes from the mouth of Satan himself because it's going to matter how we fight the lie. When the lie comes from someone else, if it's just them saying it, we battle that one way. But when we recognize that we're engaged in something bigger than just a man-to-man or a woman-to-woman or a man-to-woman kind of battle, when we realize that we're in battle with a supernatural enemy, then it changes everything. And the Apostle Paul, who wrote about half of the New Testament, he actually picks up on this fact. He actually kind of begins to understand this fact. And he taps into this as he teaches a group of Christians in a city called Ephesus. He wrote this letter to this group of Christians that was not unlike this group of Christians that was here, and they were struggling with a great number of things. And towards the end of that letter, he wanted to make sure that we understood just exactly what was at stake as we went to war with a supernatural enemy. Look what he says in Ephesians chapter 6, beginning in verse 10. Finally, he says, "Be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stands against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." See, he begins by saying, I want you to understand something. You're going to have to learn, if we're going to go to battle against Satan, we're going to have to learn to be strong in the Lord. Meaning, you can't win the battle on your own. In fact, some of you, that's exactly what you've been trying to do, isn't it? You've been cleaning out the cobwebs on your own. You've been trying to do behavior modification on your own. You've been trying to make it work and put it together and try, I can just read another book and go to another conference and I can just talk to the right person and I'll get the right set of tools and then all of a sudden I will be able to clean out all of the webs that are in my life and kill all the spiders in the lives that I believe. And what Paul wants you to understand right here is that we have a supernatural God that doesn't just sit back and watch us fight the battle against our enemy. He is willing to engage in the battle with us. And Paul says, first you got to realize you can't win on your own. You got to be strong in the Lord. You're going to have to lean on Him. And there's something about that inside of me as a dude, and maybe there's something about that inside of you as a man or a woman or American or whatever it is that just goes, man, to rely on God or rely on something, that's just totally against my nature. It goes into what we talked about in the last series where we said prayer on some level is an unnatural event because we're calling upon help from someone outside of ourselves. Man, to win this battle, Paul wants us to understand we've got to figure out how to be strong in the Lord. The second thing that he says in these handful of verses is that the reason we have to be strong in the Lord is because we're not fighting a conventional battle. We're not fighting as the world fights. We're fighting against powers and principalities. We're fighting a spiritual battle. And we cannot win a spiritual battle fighting the way the world fights their battles. I lived through 9/11, like many of you. Although the older I get, the more I realize many of you were not even born then. And I can remember in the years that followed, as we ramped up as the United States a war on terror across the globe, we were told by military strategists and by leaders, this is not a war like we've ever fought before. This war does not know geographical boundaries. This war does not use conventional methods. This war against terror, it's something that is completely different, and we have to rethink the way that we fight this war. Listen, I want you to understand, maybe this is the only thing you'll understand today. I hope that you get this. The battle that we're engaged in with our enemy cannot be fought the way that we used to fight. It cannot be fought simply with behavior modification and trying harder, because that's the way the world fights. It can't just be fought with self-help books and different conferences. Listen, those things are good, and we should seek to modify our behavior. Don't misunderstand me. But the idea that that's the way we win the battle is flawed. And that's why we keep failing. Because we're not fighting a battle against other people, against flesh and blood. We're fighting a battle against a supernatural, spiritual enemy that wants to take us down. So Paul says you got to be strong in the Lord and you got to figure out how to put on His armor. He's going to tell us now. Because it's a spiritual battle, here's how you fight. Look at verse 13. He says, therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you'll be able to stand your ground. And after you've done everything, to stand. Stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist and the breastplate of righteousness in place. I want to talk about these two. We're not going to have time to talk about every piece of the armor in depth, but I want to talk about these two. I think there's a reason why Paul starts out with the belt of truth. Because you know how you fight lies? The truth. The way that you battle a lie is is by dousing it with a healthy portion of the truth. Several months ago, we got a new dog at my house. I am not super pumped about it. We thought we were getting one thing, we ended up getting another thing. I had some rules. I didn't want a big dog, I didn't want a dog that shed. And so now we have a big dog that sheds. It's another battle that may or may not be spiritual. But regardless of that. Her name, the dog's name is Hermione. Hermione is about 6 months old or so right now. And we discovered pretty early on that Hermione, who is much bigger than she realizes, is actually afraid of the dark. She's afraid of the dark. In fact, some mornings when Jody goes to let her out, it's still dark outside, and Jody will open up the door, and she'll just sit at the door. I ain't going out there, right? I don't know what's out there. I can't see what's out there. I don't know that I'm going. In fact, over this weekend, I had to go out to the garage and start cutting out lights. When you cut out lights in our garage, especially at night, it's dark out there. And so she followed me out there to the garage, and I start cutting off lights, and the lights go out, and it gets dark. And I start walking back, and I realize that Hermione's not with me. She stopped. Like, I'm not going any farther, right? But you want to know how you ease Hermione's pain? You want to know how you ease that fear, overcome that fear? You turn the light on. And as soon as she's able to see what is around her, as soon as she's able to see the truth, right, then she is able to walk in that, and she is no longer afraid. Let me just tell you, the truth works a lot like cutting the light on in the darkness. It works a lot like turning a flashlight on in the middle of a dark night or a dark room. It sheds light on what really is. Let me tell you why this is such a big deal. This is why Satan wants to lie to us. Because we spin a lot more cobwebs and we become a lot more ineffective for God's kingdom when we make up our stories ourselves rather than basing them on truth. Meaning that when I'm able to believe a lie, make an agreement with a lie, and I spin all of these webs that are around myself, and I don't do that, I do that in the absence of the truth, I become ineffective for God's kingdom. I become ineffective in living the life that God would have for me. I become ineffective in becoming the man or woman that God has made me to be. Paul begins by going, we are going to be battling lies, supernatural, spiritual lies. And the way we do it is we shine light on the lies. And then he says this breastplate of righteousness. I love this because I think this is one of the biggest lies that we're going to go to battle. See, we buy into this lie. Those of us that are followers of Jesus Christ, we buy into this lie that we're just dirty, rotten sinners. And I guess on some level we are. But Paul would also write verses like Romans 8 where he says, there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. He would write in Corinthians, he made him, Jesus, who knew no sin, to become sin on our behalf, that we might become the righteousness of God. The righteousness that we use to cover ourselves in truth is not our own righteousness. It's the righteousness of a good God that sent his Son to die on my behalf, taking my sin and giving me his righteousness. And when we feel like we're not worth it, and when we feel like God doesn't love us, and when we buy into those lies that he would never do anything on our behalf, Paul's going, listen. The biggest truth you can have is this righteousness of God that you're wearing over your body. So that when God sees you, in spite of the fact of what sin you've done, in spite of what your past is, he sees the righteousness of God. Wow, that's big. That's so cool, right? So Paul begins by going this belt of truth and this breastplate of righteousness. He continues on. We'll look at verse 15. He says, and with your feet, fitted for the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. The gospel is the other truth that breaks down lies, right? It's this idea that Jesus Christ loves you and died for you and took your sins and gave you his righteousness. And that gospel has the power to change your life, to change my life, and to kill every spider that we have. And sometimes, he says, we need to be ready to go to other people and tell them that truth. And although we can't kill their spiders, we can shine some light on the lie they have believed. He goes on, verse 16, he says, in addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish the flaming arrows of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people. Just listen. With all of this armor I'm going to give you, there's only going to be one offensive weapon. Everything else are shields and breastplates and helmets, things that protect you. The one piece of offensive weaponry that you have in this spiritual battle, it's going to be the Word of God. It's going to be the truth of God. You can take that sword, that truth, and you can plunge it deep into the heart of your spider, killing it forever. Take the truth of God's Word and apply it to your life. You can put to death all your spiders. So Paul would say, we need to engage in behavior modification. We need to not sin and do what's right, yes. But at the end of the day, we've got to go a little deeper. At the end of the day, we've got to kind of take some time and uncover some rocks and some logs and look at what it is that's causing all of this destruction. Look at what's causing all of this entanglement, all of these webs. And that is going to happen when you start taking the truth of God's Word, the truth of His gospel, the truth of His righteousness, shining it directly into the heart of the lies that you have believed. Do you want to know what Jesus had to say about this? I think this is so cool. Because just a few verses before the passage we read earlier where He said that Satan was the father of all lies, do you want to know what Jesus said? To the Jews that had believed it, this is John chapter 8, second half of verse 31. To the Jews that had believed it, He said this, if you hold to my teaching, then you are really my disciples. And then you will know the truth. And the truth will set you free. This is so big. Because if you want to know that the truth sets you free, the opposite of that is true. That lies bind you up. And there are so many of you that you have spun these webs that have come from the lies inside of you. You don't feel like you can move anymore. And you are the exact opposite of free. And Jesus says, if you want to be free, then we've got to start by shining the truth onto the light. I told you this journey was deeply, deeply personal for me. And the reason it is because in my own life, I have bought into a number of lies. I've made agreements with a number of lies, and they've led to all kinds of behaviors. If you have just a moment, I'd like to tell you about one of them. And in fact, I'm so thankful I actually have some clarity as to where this lie was born. In 2007, I took my first job as a senior pastor. I was 29 years old, and I moved to rural Alabama to pastor this church. I had been on church staffs for about 7 years prior to that, but I had never, ever been the guy that was like supposed to preach every week. And so that was new and exciting and terrifying. And we moved to Alabama in August of 2007, and my wife loves to throw parties. She loves to host, she loves to throw parties, loves to have people at her house. And so that New Year's Eve of 2007, moving into 2008, she threw a New Year's party at my house. And it was great. People came and we invited some friends, and they brought their kids. And some of our friends from Texas were in, and we played Dance Dance Revolution, and what's the video game where you play instruments, whatever that is, Rock Band we played, and we ate finger foods and that sort of stuff. We stayed up till midnight, let our kids stay up till midnight. It was great. And a little bit reckless. And about 12:30 or 1 o'clock, people started kind of filing out to go home for this party. And across the street from us, we lived on a street that had several houses. It wasn't a neighborhood. It was just, we had several houses there on the street. And across the street from us were some of our church members, and they were about our age. For the life of me, I don't know why we didn't invite them to the party. Maybe they had something else going on. We loved them. I don't know. It wasn't like we were trying to exclude them. But for whatever reason, I don't know who fired the first paintball shot, but either they did or we did. I don't really remember. And a car got hit with paintball. Now, that's not as big a deal as it sounds. It washes off. We know from experience, or it used to anyway. In 2007, it would wash right off. And And so I had just gotten, if I'm not mistaken, I had just gotten for Christmas some paintball guns and paintballs. I had all of this stuff in a big bag in our garage. And I looked at a couple buddies that were at the party with me and I went, it's on. Right? And so we load up paintball guns, and the kids are involved, right? And we go out at 1:30-ish in the morning, and we are lobbing paintballs across the street at each other, right? Scott, the guy who lived across the street, decked himself out all in camo and was crawling through the woods to come around and take us from behind, right? This is in the middle of the night. And the kids were involved. His wife was on the street screaming at us, and it was just absolutely one of the most fun things I'd ever done in my life, hiding behind a tree at 2, 3 in the morning, lobbing paintballs at my neighbor. It was so much fun. I was 29 years old. Well, we didn't feel the need to hide that story or to suppress that story because we hadn't done anything wrong. There was not a drop of alcohol involved. No one was under the influence of any drugs. It was just, we were just having a good time. Word got back to some folks in my church. And you know how word gets back to a pastor. It never comes directly from somebody that's offended. It comes through 3 or 4 people. And no one ever wants to tell me who's really upset or who's really bothered. They're just going to tell me, I heard that so-and-so said, this person said, and I'm not going to tell you any of those things, but here they are, this is what's going on. Word got back to me that was not, this is the exact words, it's embedded on my heart. That was not behavior becoming a pastor. Short, the JIV of that is, pastors don't act that way. Especially pastors in this city. So I made a decision that day. I made a decision to be somebody that I wasn't. Now, it wasn't a hard decision. It wasn't like I was engaged in all kinds of activities that were terrible for myself. But it meant that, hey, if I really, this is what I thought. If I really am myself, if I really am who I'm wired to be, right? This fun-loving guy that loves to have people at our house, if I really am that person, here's what I believe. Here's the lie. Here's the lie. People won't like me. I'm not enough. I've got to be something different. Somewhere in January 2008, I made a little 3-degree shift in my life. It wasn't much. But when you extrapolate it out over 11 years of me being a senior pastor, do you want to know what happens? You begin to forget who you are. You can't be that person anymore. And all kinds of behaviors begin to spin out of that from Jeremy. Let me tell you what some of them were. I didn't like going out anymore. It was always work. I always felt like I had to be on, right? I had to make sure that I smiled at the right people and looked at the right people and said the right things, and I would beat myself up for saying the wrong things because I felt like, I've got to have behavior becoming a pastor. I can't make mistakes, and so I've got to be perfect. So something like going to Walmart, I'm not making this up, this is not an exaggeration. Something going to Walmart was exhausting. I didn't want to have people in my house. Because my house was one place where I felt like I didn't have to be on, right? And eventually what happens is Jody would want to host people at her house and be like, okay, we can have people at the house, but we can only do it like once a month, please. Because it's so exhausting. I didn't like going over to other people's house because it was work. People would call me on the phone and I would dread answering it. And I would make up stories about why everyone was upset with me and why everyone was mad at me and why all of these things were kind of going on. And so I began to escape more and more and more. I would want to sleep when I was free. In fact, for years, if you asked me what was my favorite activity, I would be sleeping. You want to know why? Because it was the only time where I could finally just go, Or I'd watch television. I'd come home and I'd turn on the TV and I would just escape into that. Shows I didn't care about. I would later grab my phone, scroll incessantly through Instagram, Facebook, read the news on my computer, like whatever it was I could do, play silly games, just so I could escape a little bit from the reality, just so I could numb a little bit of the pain that was inside of me. All of these things were behaviors that needed to be modified, but they were simply cobwebs. They were simply the result of a lie that I had made an agreement with, that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't good enough, that I had to act a certain way, and that way was not the way that God wired me. Can I tell you something, people? That's a lie. That's a lie. God made me the way He made me, and He wired me the way He wired me, and it is perfect in His eyes. And if someone doesn't like that, or if that's behavior not becoming a pastor, so be it. He's the one that called me to this ministry, not me. Come on. Come on. What lie is it that you're believing? As we seek to hunt that down in your heart, what I want you to kind of begin asking are two questions that will help us kind of identify it. The first question is this: what are the behaviors that I'm engaged in? What are those things? They may be socially acceptable, they may be destructive, but what are those behaviors that are tearing me down? What are those behaviors I'm using to numb the pain? What are those behaviors that I'm using to check out from reality? If you can't figure those out, then ask someone you love. They probably know. As you really start wrestling with those, as you really start taking note of those, I want you to ask a question, and it may be the hardest question to ask yourself. Here it is. Why do I do that? Really. It's important you put the really on the end of it. Because you can say, why do I do that? And you go, well, it's because I like shoes. Well, it's because I'm tired because I've been at work all day. Or, well, it's because I just don't want to have to deal with the kids for a little while. You can give all kinds of answers. But what I want you to do is pause, reflect, and go, why do I do that really? And if you get honest with yourself about that question, you may start to catch a glimpse of the spider. You may start to catch a glimpse of what really is there. For some of you, as you start to come to grips with what your spider is, with what your lie is, you may need to talk with someone. If you do, I would love to be able to help you. I would love to either be that person or find that person for you so that you can go and talk to someone to help you uncover those lies, those core beliefs that you've come to believe about yourself. Maybe even right now, you are aware of the lie. Maybe even right now you want to talk to somebody. In just a minute, I'm going to close the service down, and some of our elders, and Jody and I, we're going to be back at the starting point room. I want to invite you to come back there and talk with me, talk with us. We can point you in the direction that you can go to find help, to finally put the sword of truth deep into the spider that you've made an agreement with. That's spinning all kinds of destructive webs around your life. So here are the questions one more time. What is it that I do to numb the pain, to escape? Why do I do that? Really. Why do I do that? Really. This is such an important deal for us, for so many of us in this room. Because if we're willing to do this, if we're willing to stare those lies in the face and stare the lies in the face and shine the light of truth on them, we may just find out what Jesus meant when He says, I have come that you would have life and have it to the full. Let's pray. God, I am so thankful for your word. I'm so thankful for the wisdom of Paul to remind us that we are not engaged in a battle against flesh and blood, but we're engaged in a spiritual war with the father of lies. And maybe the father of lies has used other people to speak lies into our hearts. Maybe he's used circumstances to speak lies into our hearts. But those lies have grown into full-fledged spiders that are spinning webs, in some cases that are out of control. And God, maybe we've even tried to do behavior modification. We've even tried to kind of figure out how to move forward in that. But God, I pray that you would help us to realize that we need to be strong in the Lord, and we need to fight spiritual battles with spiritual means. And we need to find in the Word of God and the truth of our Lord the light to shine onto the lies of our heart. God, this is going to be a scary journey for us. It's going to be an uncomfortable journey for us. But God, this is necessary so that we can win the battles against the schemes and the lies of our enemies. So empower us now. Be with us now. Reveal yourself to us as we seek to discover the men and women that you've called us to be. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you guys so much for coming. I'll see you next week.